It's official. The Carolina Panthers have placed a franchise tag on star edge rusher Brian Burns. But do they have any intention of actually extending Brian Burns? We'll talk about it right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and yes, Friday, your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, where on Fridays throughout the offseason, right here on the show, I'm answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions, either at me or DM me to get your questions in for this week's edition of the weekly Friday mailbag right here on Locked On Panthers. Today's episode of Locked On Panthers is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started today. And by the way, all the folks here in the great state of North Carolina, Monday, March 11th, FanDuel is here. Sports betting, it's here in North Carolina. And I cannot wait. So please visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Get ready. Tons of bonuses out there. Tons of opportunities to win. ACC tournament next week, March Madness. Let's get it on. All right. So the main focus of today's show is, of course, going to be on Brian Burns and what's going on with the salary cap and some of the moves ahead of the new league year. So let's get right into it on today's show. We talked about yesterday on the show with the Carolina Panthers, either give Brian Burns the exclusive franchise tag or the non-exclusive franchise tag. And they went out there and they gave Brian Burns the non-exclusive franchise tag. A quick refresher. This tag allows a player, Brian Burns, to sign an offer sheet with another team. The original team, the Carolina Panthers, have the right to match or receive 2 first-round draft picks in compensation if they allow the player to leave. So the Panthers could look at the offer sheet. Another team gives Brian Burns and say, we're good with that. Or they could say, you know what? We're good. We don't want to give Brian Burns that kind of money. You take him off our hands, and we will gladly take 2 first-round picks that this team desperately needs, especially after a 2-15 season. And unfortunately, as we all know, not having the number 1 overall pick in this year's draft. And I'll say once again, I'm not upset they don't have it because they can't use it on a player. I'm upset they don't have it because they cannot trade back to get assets to build out this roster and, of course, to help Bryce Young. So the Panthers have slapped the tag. You can either place the tag like what happened in Indianapolis, where they're still trying to negotiate with Michael Pittman Jr., what happened in Baltimore, where they still want to negotiate with Justin Madubuike, but slapping the tag, a little bit different. The Panthers have had plenty of opportunities now to give Brian Burns what he wants, and they have not been willing to do that. So now they have slapped the tag on him, and we'll see where it goes from here. Last year, there were 6 players who were given the non-exclusive franchise tag. Most famously, it was Lamar Jackson, who no team in the NFL was willing to offer a contract to. So he stayed in Baltimore and is now a 2-time MVP. Big swing and a miss by the rest of the league. Saquon Barkley in New York with the Giants. He stayed there. Evan Ingram with the Jags. He also got it, and he's still in Jacksonville. Josh Jacobs with the Raiders. He was given the tag. Daron Payne was given the tag up in Washington before signing a long-term deal. Then Tony Pollard, the same case, down in Dallas, got the tag, and now he's going to be free agent, I believe, with Barkley and with Josh Jacobs. The last player, by the way, brought this up yesterday on the show, the last player who was given the non-exclusive franchise tag, then was provided an offer sheet, and his team said, no, we'll take the 2 first-round picks, was Joey Galloway in 2000 with the Seattle Seahawks. The Cowboys, of course, it was the Cowboys who did this, gave him the offer sheet, gave it 2 first-round picks. Seattle got the 2 first-round picks, and one of them became Sean Alexander, and I think things worked out in the long run for the Seattle Seahawks when they decided to not match that offer. So it's been 24 years. It is a rare occurrence that you see a team place a player on a non-exclusive tag, and then that player leaves to go elsewhere, and that team then in return gets 2 first-round picks. So I wouldn't be sitting here as a Panther fan believing that's going to be the end result here, but this is a different scenario from past years. And it is odd that last year of Lamar Jackson, I've brought this up multiple times now so far on the show this week, there were factors to why another team in the NFL and really an owner in the NFL was not willing to give an offer sheet out there for Lamar Jackson. We understand that. This is a situation, though, it's a little bit different, of course, to where I don't know if the Panthers are 100% on board of extending Brian Burns. So a few things with this news, I'll put that in quotes. This is not something that's surprising to anybody. Burns is going to be playing on a $24 million non-exclusive franchise tag. That will also be his cap number. The Carolina Panthers, according to overthecap.com, have $35 million in cap space. Go ahead and subtract $24 million. That's $11 million of cap space. Not a lot of cap space. Panthers are going to need to make some moves. They have begun shedding some salary. We'll talk about that and some players who may be up next when it comes to some of these cap casualties in just a moment on the show. But number one, this is the right decision for Carolina. Absolutely not. They could not allow Brian Burns to walk for nothing after turning down the Rams picks, after turning down potentially trading him to Chicago last year to get up to number 1 to draft Bryce Young. They have had multiple opportunities now to move off of Brian Burns and to get something in return. They could not let him walk. That's pretty much the main reason why this is the right decision. The second thing, this also allows the Panthers some time to negotiate with Brian Burns. Now, do they truly want to negotiate still? We'll see, but this gives them until middle of July. Last year was July 17th was the deadline to get a new deal done with players on the franchise tag. And after that, you can't negotiate with them until free agency, until the season's over. And by that point in time, the tag goes up and you're unlikely, as we're seeing with Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, and those are running backs, completely different scenario with those positions as compared to what's going on with an edge rusher. You're probably not going to tag them again. So the Panthers still have some time, about 3.5 months to figure out that kind of deal. Also, it allows them to know what they have in salary cap space heading into next Wednesday when the new league year begins at 4 p.m. Eastern time. The Panthers can start shedding salary, which they've done, and they can figure out what exactly their plan is going to be if they're able to trade Burns, if they're able to extend Burns, or if he's just going to play on this $24 million franchise tag. Number two, is this a move that's being made so the Panthers can extend Burns, or if they can trade Brian Burns? Let's just read between the lines from a couple of the statements put out there by other teams across the NFL on Tuesday when they tagged their players in comparison to what the Panthers put out there. The Jags, not the best run organization in the NFL, but they're an organization that's on the up and up even after the collapse in the second half of last season. Their general manager, Trent Baalke, the same guy where the fans a couple years ago wore clown masks because they wanted to get him fired. He put out a statement on Tuesday saying that they want to continue negotiations with their star edge rusher, Josh Allen, who had 17.5 sacks this past season. He put out some quotes talking about how we love Josh, just ran out of time, and we still want to talk to him. The Ravens, their general manager, Eric DeCosta, did the same thing when talking about tagging Justin Madubuike. He said, we were unable to agree on a contract extension with Justin before the deadline, and we'll use franchise tag. Justin is a great player and person, and we will continue to negotiate a long-term deal with him. Think back to the reports also put out there when Michael Pittman Jr. and Antoine Winfield Jr. were both tagged in Indianapolis and Tampa Bay, respectively. Both of those reports that came out were that the teams are going to work towards a long-term deal. Now compare that to the Carolina Panthers. When Schefter, when Rappaport, and all the insiders out there put out the news that Brian Burns was being tagged, there was no conversation after it about, oh yeah, they're also going to continue to negotiate. There was no qualifier. It was just, he's been tagged. It's a non-exclusive franchise tag. You go to Panthers.com. A good buddy, Darren Gant, he wrote an article about Brian Burns being franchise tagged, and there was no mention of the Panthers continuing negotiations with Brian Burns. That's just something that makes me go, do the Panthers actually want to extend Brian Burns, or is this just a means to the end, and the end being a trade and getting back some picks to help build this roster, especially on the offensive side of the ball, to help out Bryce Young? I'm beginning to believe that may be what the Carolina Panthers want to do. And for some fans out there, either watching the show on YouTube or listening to it wherever you listen to your favorite podcast, you're probably thinking, okay, Julian, finally, you are getting on board with what I want to happen. I want Brian Burns to be traded. I don't want that to happen, but I know there's a lot of fans out there who want to see it happen, especially after he had a lackluster season. And we've gone over the stats that Joe Person of The Athletic put out there, where the Carolina Panthers just did not have a lot of opportunities in the fourth quarter of games to go get after the passer because they were always trailing. And that's a big reason why Brian Burns was not able to. It's not a big reason, but it's a part of the reason why Brian Burns' numbers were down this past season. You look at the elbow injury he suffered that slowed him down. Also, just the mental and seeing Shaq Thompson go down, JC Horn go down. He mentioned this at locker room cleanout day. It got to him. Now, did he slow down his intensity? He'll say no, but you watch, maybe he did. Wasn't the same player we saw against Atlanta, where it's basically like, pay me, show me the money. The rest of the season wasn't like that for Brian Burns. So the Panthers, not a similar statement like Trent Baalke and Eric DeCosta in Jacksonville and Baltimore, or similar reports that you saw from the same guys that reported about Burns being franchise tagged. They did not have the qualifier of, they're going to still continue to negotiate. Let's go back to what we heard from Josina Anderson of CBS Sports on Sunday. She said the Panthers and Brian Burns have ended contract negotiations. The franchise tag, of course, would still be a tool, but right now they're not talking. And how long will that be the case? We'll find out. Number 3, though, if they're trading Brian Burns, like I mentioned at the top of the show, don't expect it to be 2 first-round picks. Mentioned this yesterday when looking at the situation in Kansas City with L'Jarius Sneed at a cornerback position. And I think edge rusher more important than corner, but those are 2 clearly vital positions considering how forward pass is very important in today's game. You have people who can throw the ball, of course, at quarterback. You have guys who can protect your quarterback, guys who can get after the quarterback, guys who can catch the ball, and guys who can defend those guys who catch the ball. So those are 5 very important facets and positions in the game of football today. The Chiefs tagged him, L'Jarius Sneed, that is, and they have the intention of trading him. They do not have the intention of getting 2 first-round picks because they know that would be insane that they would get 2 first-round picks for L'Jarius Sneed. That has not happened in 24 years, but that does not mean it won't happen. And we know that a team out there, the Los Angeles Rams, have valued Brian Burns for 2 first-round picks, and depending on who you believe, I've seen second-round pick, I've seen third-round pick. It's all over the board, but it's a day 2 pick. So 2 first-round picks and a day 2 pick. We've already seen what a team was willing to give up for Brian Burns, and the Panthers were not interested in giving that up. So I would not expect the Panthers to get 2 first-round picks, but this is possibly how it's going to go. They're going to allow Brian Burns starting on Monday to start negotiating with other teams out there. Those teams could decide to do the offer sheet and have the Panthers look at it and decide whether they want to get 2 first-round picks or decline it. I'm guessing the Panthers are probably going to decline it and take 2 first-round picks. That would, I don't know, maybe that would probably be my move as well. Just looking at the draft compensation and how, man, there's some players that could really help them out this year, and having 2 first-round picks next year, and this is going to be a long rebuild, that may be the best thing for the team. But it's just a straight-up trade without the offer sheet. And the Panthers turning it down, I don't think that's going to be the case. The Chiefs are going to go about it where they're going to find what's the most realistic trade for them. I think the Panthers are probably going to be in the same boat where they're going to allow Brian Burns to gauge the market. He can go talk to a team. That team can go back to Carolina and say, hey, this is what we're willing to part ways with. And the Panthers could tell them to go bleep themselves. And that, no. Only way we're parting ways with Burns is if you do the offer sheet, we turn that down, and then we get those 2 first-round picks. That's what they could do. I think what really would happen is that they're going to have to sit here and they're going to accept the best offer if they, in fact, do not want to negotiate with Brian Burns anymore. I don't think it's anymore, but right now they're kind of done with that. Do they not want to do it for the time being and then get back to it? Or if they're just flat out done, then maybe they just take what they can get and move on. What they can get needs to be a first-round pick, mind you. I'm talking first-round pick, day 2 pick. You might not get the 2 first, but you got to at least get a first-rounder and a day 2 pick to help you out this draft. Not talking about next year. This draft, the Carolina Panthers need to be able to do that, certainly to help their team moving forward. Last thing here, and I've been saying this since August, Brian Burns still has a ton of leverage in this situation. Considering that Frankie Louvu is an unrestricted free agent, he was not tagged by the Carolina Panthers. Brian Burns is the only edge rushing threat on the roster. It ain't DJ Johnson. It ain't Eku Leota. It ain't Amari Barno, who may not even make the team this upcoming season. it's just Brian Burns. And that has really been the case the last 2 seasons. Luvu's done his part, but Burns is really the Pro Bowl kind of star edge rusher, guy entering his prime that teams would be willing to pay top dollar for if he was available as a free agent. Brian Burns also knows that the Panthers turned down 2 first-round picks and a day 2 pick from the Rams. He knows that the Panthers value him that high. And I understand that was a different general manager and that Dan Morgan should not have to sit here and be a victim of the crimes committed by Scott Fitter in the past. But let's not pretend that Dan Morgan wasn't in those meeting rooms, that he was not in this building when all that went down. And he mentioned last week when people were asking him about what's different between you and Scott, that, okay, just because I'm good friends with Scott, which is still the case, does not mean that I was aligned with everything that he did. When you're the final decision maker, which is really David Tepper, then things are a little bit different, which now he hopefully prayers up is the final decision maker here in Carolina. We will find out in due time whether that is the case. Things can be different in that situation. So while that may be true that Scott Fitter, who was the general manager at that point in time, Dan Morgan was here. And Brian Burns still understands what the Carolina Panthers, the owner who signs up on all these things, what they turn down to keep him here. He knows what his value is. And he knows what's also on this roster talent-wise. And also, he's eating up a ton of the cap. And the quicker the Carolina Panthers figure this out, whether it's a trade or an extension, the better off they are heading to free agency and the better off they are finding a way to build this roster to help out Bryce Young and get this team out of the cellar of the NFL. The leverage is still in Brian Burns' court. We'll see what happens. Looks at the Panthers. Going to take some time off, figure out the rest of the salary cap. But I am hard-pressed to believe that they truly want to extend him at this point in time, just based off of a few things that I've been monitoring here over the last, year in Carolina. So Brian Burns, he is franchise tag. We'll find out what his future is at some point in time in the next week, months. We'll see when that is. The Panthers, in the meantime, have begun to shed some salary. And not surprising, Hayden Hurst is a one and done here in Carolina. We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. The wait is almost over. North Carolina FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, is coming to our beautiful state on March 11th. Next Monday, we'll finally be able to bet on all our favorite teams and all our favorite sports with FanDuel. There's tons of ways for you to get in on the action. You can bet on everything from the money line to over-unders, which team will win this year's Tobacco Road Rivalry. And I know what you're thinking. Duke and Carolina play on Saturday. ACC tournaments next week. They're the top 2 teams in the league. Who's to say 1v2 matchup in the ACC tournament final next Saturday in DC? You could bet on that with FanDuel, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, with live betting, you can even pick which player will put up the next bucket and the one after that. See for yourself why FanDuel is America's #1 sports book. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon so you can be the first to know when FanDuel goes live in North Carolina. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel. Well, since Brian Burns is going to be eating up the salary cap for the time being, the Carolina Panthers need to start shedding some salary so they can do something once free agency begins next Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. On Monday, we found out the Carolina Panthers would be parting ways with Dante Jackson, either via a trade or just a flat-out release. Why? Because Dante Jackson is due a $4 million roster bonus on March 16th, and Dante Jackson also has the second highest cap hit on the team at $15.7 million. That is just a non-starter for the Carolina Panthers. The dead money hit, if they do trade or release him, will be $9.7 million. The cap savings will be $5.9 million for the Carolina Panthers. The Panthers have until the second day of the new league year, beginning next week on Wednesday, to trade Jackson, unless they will have to pay him a $4 million salary, which is earned on the third day of the new league year. So day 2, next week on the 15th, that's when the Carolina Panthers have to decide whether they're going to cut him or they're going to be able to trade him. And of course, they would love to do that by the end of the weekend or by, of course, March 13th. March 15th, that's time to look at whether the Carolina Panthers are going to be able to trade or release Dante Jackson. The news came out on Tuesday that the Carolina Panthers will be moving on from Hayden Hurst, who last year was one of the big free agent signings for the Carolina Panthers. Signed a 3-year, $21.75 million contract with $13 million in guarantees, basically a 2-year, $13 million contract. Turned out it's only going to be a 1-year contract, and he's still going to get those $13 million large. Hayden Hurst was due a $1.85 million roster bonus also on March 16th. The Carolina Panthers, like Dante Jackson said, hell no, we're not doing this. The dead money hit will be $9.8 million, and they will only save $52,000. What some of you guys maybe listening to the show making a year, that's all the Carolina Panthers will be able to save when it comes to the salary cap. Not a lot. Now, one other option, if they want to do post June 1, dead money would be split. It'd be 7.8 and 24, $2 million and 25, and it would save $2 million. But thinking about it, I feel like the Panthers just want to go ahead, eat the costs, be done with it, not sit around here and wait to see whether they can get that done. Just move on from Hayden Hurst. And we talked about this either last week or the week prior about Hayden Hurst, the tight end outlook, and it just made sense. Just move on from him. He's not somebody who's going to help you. He's moved on to multiple teams now. He's been, a Raven, a Bengal, a Falcon, now a Panther. It's 4 teams in large part because all he is a catching tight end. He's not somebody who's going to be great when it comes to run blocking, and Hayden Hurst has bounced around the league. I am concerned about his health as he missed the last 7 games of last season due to a concussion suffered, and he had some memory loss there. Hayden, you made your money. The Panthers, you got $13 million guaranteed from them. Please, man, just give it up. Just go live your life. You are still in your 30s. You're a young man. You're healthy. You don't need to do this anymore. This is the right decision for the Carolina Panthers. Now, that dead cap money, that's a lot, 9.8. The Panthers currently have 9.2. Justin Houston, that's 3.8 million. DJ Chark's 3.1. These are void years that they put on to sign them so that their cap number would not be as high. Sam Franklin's 1.2. Matt Corral, 442,000, and Brandon Smith, 378,000. That's left over from their rookie deal. So that's the dead cap money that they have right now. It's 9.2. So go ahead and add Hayden Hurst. That'll be 9.8. You do the math for me. I don't want to do it. I believe that'll be $19 million in dead cap money for the Carolina Panthers once that happens. And plus, Dante, you're looking at $28 million of dead cap money. A lot. They're not going to be the only guys that become salary cap casualties, and we had talked about this prior. It made sense that Hayden Hurst would be. I talked about Dante Jackson. I don't know if I really got to the point where I wanted to see it happen. I just felt like with the roster bonus, nearly $6 million of cap savings, that's just not a guy you're going to keep around with the second highest cap hit on the team. The other guys I'm looking at, there's 3 of them. Number 1, Miles Sanders. He's someone, though, where it's a little bit more complicated. He has a roster bonus that's due to him on March 16th, and the guys that we're looking at are roster bonus guys for the most part. $2 million. He does not deserve that after this past season, and really just the way the running back market is, should have never gotten the money that he got last offseason. But the Panthers believe, hey, running backs matter. Thanks a lot, Deuce Staley and Scott Fitterer. The dead money, if they cut him right now, is $10.4 million. The cap savings, they lose actually $2.75 million. So looking June 1, the best situation is probably to keep him around through OTAs, figure out whether he actually could fit into the roster. It's already been said by Dan Morgan and also by Dave Canales that Chuba Hubbard is RB1 right now. That could change. The Panthers could go crazy again and decide, we want Saquon Barkley, we want Josh Jacobs. That would be insane. Or they just go to the draft and they're like, okay, well, let's go with this guy instead of Chuba as RB1. But even in that scenario, Miles Sanders would be out the door. Dead money would be split post June 1 and post OTAs. That's $7.4 million. That's $200,000 of cap savings. Still not a lot. Dead money in 25 and 26 will be 1.475 respectively in both of those years. Not a ton of cap savings, just like with Hayden Hurst, but you can't lose $2 million. Now you got to give him the roster bonus, and you hate to do that, but that's on the old GM and on Samir Suleiman for signing that deal. Hopefully the new GM, Dan Morgan, and the new cap guy, Brant Tillis, will do a much better job when it comes to those kind of contracts and not paying running backs big time money. The second guy I'm looking at, and I think this would happen pretty quickly. I've already seen Panther fans just calling for this man's head, just begging, please, Panthers, we need to get rid of this guy. Fire this man. I have not seen someone who Panther fans wanted fired this badly since, well, I guess a couple weeks ago when they fired Scott Fitterer. Ian Thomas is due a $1.5 million roster bonus. Last year had the same roster bonus, and that was converted into a signing bonus. They can't do that this year. No reason to do it. He was getting phased out at the end of the season. New offense. Tommy Trimble's emerged as a solid tight end option for the Carolina Panthers. Hayden Hurst is out the door. They had some young guys like a Stephon Sullivan who they can continue to work with. And there are some other options out there in the tight end market that I think would certainly be upgrades over Ian Thomas. So $1.5 million roster bonus. I assume that's due March 16th as well. No. Dead money, only 3.7. Don't love it, but not as significant as a Miles Sanders and a Hayden Hurst and a Dante Jackson. Cap savings, $2.2 million. That's not insignificant. Terrace Marshall, the final one, dead money, only $381,000. Thank you to that rookie deal. Cap savings, $1.4 million. Still not a lot, but not nothing. That's about $3.6 million Carolina Panthers can save by cutting those two players. And I would expect that those are the next guys on the chopping block. And Miles Sanders, he's lucky. And damn, I don't want to be like that. But Miles Sanders, he's fortunate because that roster bonus is there. But the Panthers lose a lot of money if they do get rid of him right now. They could of course do post June 1 today, but maybe they'll keep him around. I feel like there's no harm in doing that other than to the player getting another opportunity elsewhere. But for the team, there's not much harm to keep him around through OTAs and seeing how he fits in and if he can be saved after what was a very disappointing season last year. A couple of other important news around the league that could impact the Carolina Panthers wide receiver market as Michael Pittman Jr. has been tagged. And there's another tight end in Seattle who's going to be a free agent. Could he be an option for the Carolina Panthers? We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked on Panthers. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts, your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because of eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Two more things I want to hit on before getting out of here on today's show. Number one, the wide receiver market. Woof. Not what the Carolina Panthers need, not what the Carolina Panthers certainly wanted. We know Mike Evans on Monday, he's off the board. The Bucs are giving him $35 million guaranteed, 2-year deal, $52 million. Great job by his agent. Good for Mike Evans. Going to be a Buck for life. Now he'll be back in free agency in 2 years. And maybe if he's still playing at the level he's played at for the first 10 years of his career, heading into his age 33 season, it's possible that Mike Evans gets another big deal, but really probably a 1-year deal. So maybe down the road, Dave Canales, fingers crossed, he works out in Carolina, Mike Evans could be a Carolina Panther. But it looks like he's going to end his career as a Buck, so staying down there in Tampa. Good for him, good for the Bucs, whatever. T. Higgins, he was tagged. The Bengals did it prior to the combine, and a lot of reports out there were, okay, typically, if you do this, you're willing to trade him. Haven't heard anything about that since. We've heard just that's what the league feels like is the case, because that's typically what the case is. Maybe Cincinnati is just like, bleep it. Let's just go ahead and tag him. Let's move on and let's figure out the rest of our salary cap and we'll see what we want to do. I would love for the T. Higgins to be Carolina Panther, but he was drafted 33rd overall. A couple of years ago, the Panthers had the 33rd pick. They get somebody who can end up being T. Higgins for far less and for 4 years, and then sign him to an extension down the road and not give up any draft picks, which is what it would cost for them to do since he's franchise tagged. And like here in Carolina, Brian Burns, like in Kansas City, L'Jarius Sneed, I don't expect any team to put down an offer sheet and then give up 2 first-round picks. It would be a deal negotiated outside of those parameters to where it would actually be realistic for both sides to get it done if that's what they want to do there in Cincinnati and then potentially here in Carolina. The Jags have tagged Josh Allen, their outstanding edge rusher, which means Calvin Ridley is going to hit the market as the most coveted free agent wide receiver. Odell Beckham Jr. is available. You got guys like Gabe Davis available. You also have Hollywood Brown available, but Mike Evans is not available. T. Higgins is not available. Michael Pittman Jr. is not available. He's the top guy. And according to reports out there, teams are going to be paying him a ton of money to come to them. The Jags want to keep him around. Good luck doing that, Jacksonville, as it's going to be very difficult to sign him. And Carolina, it's going to be very difficult for them as well to sign Calvin Ridley. But that is going to be the guy I'm looking at as the top option for this team and for a lot of teams out there. Kansas City needs a wide receiver. Hell, if I'm Calvin Ridley, I'm going to KC. But that might not be the case. We'll see. So the free agent wide receiver market for the second year in a row looks like it's going to be slim pickings, and that's a bad thing for the Carolina Panthers. The Panthers last year put themselves in that crap situation when they decided that DJ Moore was going to be a part of that trade. I understand that Ryan Poles, the Bears GM, who is the star of the draft once again with the number 1 overall pick. Oh, God, why did that have to be the case? He will not do that. Last year, he would not do it without DJ Moore being a part of it because, of course, you want to have your young quarterback have a star wide receiver. What a novel concept. The Carolina Panthers said, screw that, man. We don't need that. We'll be fine. They were not fine at all. And now they're back in a situation where unless they're going to be able to pay Calvin Ridley the most money, if he's in fact going to go to the highest bidder, which Calvin, you should do, the Panthers may be looking at the second tier of free agent wide receivers, which may have been the case anyways. Even had Mike Evans made it to free agency, they may have already been looking at some of those second tier guys like a Gabe Davis and like a Hollywood Brown. We'll see how it pans out. But the Panthers, probably the best thing for them is just to focus on the receivers in the draft. I keep seeing how Keon Coleman is either end of the first round guy. We're going to be right there available at 33. I would love to have him. Guys like Troy Franklin as well out of Oregon. He's somebody that could be available. I can't see how A.D. Mitchell out of Texas is not a first round pick. Maybe Xavier Worthy. I'm not a fan, but now he's going to go in the first round just because he ran a 40, because that's what matters in football nowadays, how fast you can run in a straight line. Not whether you can actually catch the ball or if you're strong enough to catch the ball at the goal line and then fight through and score a touchdown against your chief rival in Oklahoma Sooners, which he could not do this past season. And you can hint at how I'm not a big fan of Xavier Worthy. Best of luck to him. Nothing personal. Just I'll pass. Second thing I want to point out, the Seahawks are cutting Will Dissly. That will save them $7 million. Great for Seattle. Don't care about them, but good for Carolina as the Panthers have the former Seattle Seahawks tight end coach, Pat McPherson, now here in Carolina. I had talked about how Noah Fant or Colby Parkinson now that Hayden Hurst is gone and Ian Thomas will soon to be gone, could be options for the Carolina Panthers. Now add Will Dissly to that list as well. I'll take Fant first, but Colby Parkinson probably the second guy. And there was some reports this past weekend that he could actually make a little bit more than people would expect out of the tight end of his caliber. So Will Dissly, Noah Fant, Colby Parkinson, you have to imagine one of those guys is bound to be a Carolina Panther by the end of next week. All right, it's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all, make sure to subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, where on Fridays throughout the offseason, I'm right here on the show answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions, either at me or DM me to get those questions into me now. But in the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole, as always, keep pounding, and I'll talk to y'all on Thursday.